Well, welcome to the Beyond Cinema studio here at Tiff. Imogen Poots, John Ridley. Firstly, congratulations, John. I mean, to be here not just with a film that you've written and directed, but also having written 12 Years a Slave. It must feel a little bit overwhelming for you at the moment.
It has been. It's been a fantastic couple of days. It's nice, honestly, in some ways, to be at the tail end of it, but close enough that you can still enjoy these things. And honestly, the audience reception, you don't necessarily go into them thinking that everyone is going to get it and enjoy it, but at a festival that is so geared toward the audience and the viewers, to have them receive it well, that honestly means the world.
Yeah, and to have your last few years being so heavily devoted to words, between Three Kings and Red Tail and all this sort of stuff, is it also exciting for you to kind of be back with the project that you directed and obviously felt a desire to commit to in such a big way?
It is. It's interesting because so many things, you have so much control when the words are just on the page. And when you then take that next step and you're trying to combine all of these elements, the thing that really was most gratifying to me was honestly the cast and the crew, because those are the people who have the faith in you. They read the script, they find something about it that they can gravitate towards. And you see a lot of people who take what you thought was great and then elevate it to a whole other level. There's nothing like bringing all these elements to life, and I think for me that's that joy, because as a writer often you can just sit in a room and it's enjoyment in its own right, but to bring it all to fruition and have the partnership with a lot of people, and honestly it's the memories start to flood back. It was really in a way where you sit in a room and you cut and you edit and it's all very fundamental and you hope it works and you hope there's something there, but when people respond to it and they cry or they laugh, or you see people you haven't seen in a while and you go, oh, I remember that day we were shooting. That to me is really gratifying.
What had you seen Imogen in, or what did you see in Imogen that made her right for Linda?
The thing that I saw in Imogen, two things. One, her ability to express beyond words. As any actor who reaches her level, the ability to translate dialogue, it becomes to a level fundamental. Of course she can do that, but there was a piece of footage I saw very, very on where someone was imparting some very painful information to her, and the camera just held on her, and you got every single thing through that. And to me, as I was maturing as a writer and realizing that sometimes a script is not all about words, to know that somebody could do either, that was a big thing for me. The other thing, and this was more as I got to know her, and I mean this very sincerely, Imogen just has a real... You laugh. I'm getting ready to talk about your maturity.
Nice. No, it's so... Oh.
And then, someone who always has a book in her hand, is always reading, is always very, very curious, who would, and for me, very important, would show up on set on days that she wasn't necessarily working. To be curious in all aspects of it is very important, because I don't think if you have a totality, not just of the film, but of the world, of the environment. I tried to give her so much information about that era, and she would just soak it up and read and be curious about it. That was very gratifying for me.
Yeah, Imogen, I couldn't imagine how fun it would be to imagine having conversations with Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
For you, was that kind of like this amazing experience in and of itself? And what was that first meeting like with John? What did he give you?
It was awesome. Well, first of all, I read the script and I just thought it was so terrific, because it's sort of like the side wings to a performance. It's kind of what's going on outside of the main focus, and that being Jimi Hendrix. And I think it was a fascinating exploration of the people who informed his career and his life and his choices, and how long they stayed around and who fell away and who remained and for what reasons and purposes and all those things, which I just find fascinating in general, because you're, as a musician, I suppose you're playing some sort of a role, and who's kind of putting that together with you. And the first meeting with John was amazing. I remember we sat down in a crowded cafe in Los Angeles, and we just spoke about script, we spoke about music, we just it was just a very real, wonderful discussion, and it didn't really feel like a meeting. It just kind of, sometimes those things can just feel like a conversation that just is really great, and it so happens that you have the same kind of train of thought. Yeah.
So that's interesting that you say that about kind of the people in the wings and the people who make up your team, because that applies to you as an actor and as you as a writer-director too, is that you have to recognize at some point who is the right person for you, or the right person to have around you. Is it just a groupie or is this person of substance and willing to make introductions and take you around to meet the player, guy from the Animals.
And also that's it. There's like
you.
so many musicians at that time with it really, really blowing up in the 60s that it's a lot of egos, and that was very interesting watching all the documentaries, is to see all the different perspectives and opinions that would probably change, since the death of Jimi Hendrix or whatever, and what was their opinion prior to that. It's fascinating.
Sifting through all that archival footage and being inspired by it and finding these gems, how much of that did you rely on someone else to do, and how much was you just spending that time finding these pieces of the puzzle?
Well, for me, the jumping off point was presenting archival footage and saying, here are these elements in and of the era, but I have to give a lot of thanks to my editor, Hank Corwin, who looked at that material and said, why just keep that notionally in the back of your mind? Can we drop some of these things in? I mean, a lot of these events, we're going 47, 48, 49, 50 years ago. So there are people now who, for them, this is ancient history. So when you have these moments and you have these images, whether they're stark or harsh or whether they're just things that help people learn about or see or understand that space, there's no reason to hold back. If the film itself holds up, then those artifacts that drop in enhance. If you're just using it as a gimmick, if you don't have that connectivity, you don't have that strength of character, then it comes off that way. But I think what is happening is so strong, it gets wrapped up in this tableau where you go, oh my God, is this film, is it a documentary? Is it a film? Is it a piece of art? It becomes something. When it's so small, it helps elevate it to something even larger.
Yeah, and that, obviously there was a lot of traction in terms of discussion on the internet and all that sort of stuff while you were making the film, because snippets came out, there's not going to be Hendrix music, and then people were like, how is that even possible to kind of put that portrait? For you, was that a challenge to be met head on, or was that something that you tracked as well, that conversation, and wanted to engage in that conversation?
I didn't track that conversation, but I always knew that any time that you're showing something to people new and different, it's a challenge, because anybody comes into any film, whether it's this, whether it's a science fiction, whether it's a romantic comedy, with a preconceived notion of, I loved that version of it, can they do the same thing? But I think for all of us, if we're just delivering what people have seen before, then we're not really adding to it. And I would say, for me, I was never concerned, because the connectivity with these characters, the emotion, the emotional velocity, and the performances that are there, there are moments where if all we were relying on is the music, if the film lived or died by the music, then we were dead in the water. If what we were bringing is a depth of character, depth of relationship, then people are going to come out of this going, oh my God, I want more, as opposed to, well, I've seen that, there's nothing else to be told.
And there's that little band that has some music in the film, the Beatles, as well. So
they did all right for
they did
themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good. That's a pretty good.
It ain't bad.
Yeah. What was it though about Andre Benjamin? Because obviously so much relies on that as well. That portrayal. What were you most surprised about from him in this performance?
The thing that surprised me the most was you have an individual who is so accomplished in so many areas, and my concern was that he could just come in and just sort of do the part and move through it. Andre worked so phenomenally hard to get not just the tics of Jimi Hendrix or the idioms of Jimi Hendrix, but really find an emotional honesty with the character. He worked hard in the early going, he worked amazingly hard with the rest of the actors, and the thing that I really appreciated is they worked as a group, and there were things that as a writer, as a director, you can hope are on the page, or that you can hope that you can bring on the set, but what they chose to do together and just hang out and enjoy each other's company. For me, when you see that film and you see the performances, I certainly know where I wrote it, but there's a genuine nature that you can't capture unless you have actors who are willing to bring that.
And it's almost like an innate quality within Andre. I think that's sort of this, he's such a curious human being. He really is. He's always like, what's next, and I think that's something that Hendrix shared by the sounds of it, and it's just a kind of inner calm too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, the big thing is you can read actors, and there's so many talented people out there, and they're going to read it so well, but you sit down with somebody like Andre, and as Imogen says, who's just got this this innocence and a curiosity and emotionally is so close to it. And for me, with Imogen, somebody who's young but has a maturity and has a worldview that Linda Keith did, who to me is one of the most amazing unsung figures of rock and roll. When you find that in the individual, their talent that they have already is just going to elevate what they're doing, and then just elevate everything around them and everybody around them.
It's amazing how many lives she touched, you know, in terms of on that level, on that scale. I mean, Keith Richards.
Yeah, totally.
Have you met Keith Richards at all?
Not yet. Is he around? No, it's funny. It's like she really did touch many people, and likewise back to her. I think that's the refreshing thing about her, is she was around all these personalities and these figures who are so iconic, but there's something very discreet about her and no bullshit, and just that's a wonderful thing.
She is an amazingly humble person, and in choosing that part to get someone who can really embody all of those things, again, beyond just acting, truly being, and that was very special for me.
I mean, it's so cool because you get to really consider whether Hendrix was a success inevitably. You know, it seems inevitable now that someone with that talent had that success, but perhaps in his head at one point it wasn't so inevitable. You know?
I think Jimi Hendrix would have been a success in some form, but I really believe this, were it not for Linda Keith, he would not have been a success in the form with the experience. She introduced him to Chaz Chandler. Chaz Chandler put him together with Noel and with Mitch. Chaz sold his guitars to pay for their first recording session. Jimmy had the talent and the ability to achieve, but it's, as we know him now, that would have been the question. And for me, my own personal answer is without Linda Keith, not in that form.
What was it like filming in Ireland?
It was fantastic. It was, the crew was great. People were so focused on what was going on. And for me personally, it was like we were in a little island, a little space.
Everyone was so nice. The crew honestly were adorable.
And final question for each of you. If you could have these heart-to-heart discussions off camera with any of your kind of Hendrix level idols, who would they be?
Probably somebody like, I want to say someone like Cary Grant, someone kind of old school like that, or Gloria Swanson, someone like that.
You know, I would have to say, honestly, I had the opportunity to speak with Linda Keith, and she is, in my opinion, an amazing individual and so humble, and it was very difficult on the one hand for someone who enjoyed their anonymity to say, but in my opinion, you changed the course of music history, and I want people to be aware of that. I feel very blessed to have ever had the opportunity to speak with her, and my only desire in putting this together was to honor what she did, as well as the memory of all of these individuals. It was an amazing time, a very heady time, and I hope in that film people walk away with the idea that these were real people, and it was a real life, and an amazing year in an amazing life of a truly singular individual.
Very cool. Well, thanks for spending a few minutes in that year with us.
It was my pleasure.
Cheers.